All right. Today we're going to be talking about the science of trust. What does it mean to enter into God's rest? And then point number two is prosperity preaching is harmful to God's mission of building our trust in God. All right. So I'll start by saying that we all become astronauts eventually, exploring the vast of outer space untethered. As you can see, I have an astronaut here, and that's a man on the moon. And what the analogy I'm giving here is that imagine being an astronaut and you're tethered to the spaceship so you don't float away. You get off the spaceship, you're jumping around, you're frolicking, enjoying no gravity, and then say your tether comes off and you jump too high and you float into outer space. And now you are spinning out of control. You don't have control. There's no gravity. And you're getting further and further away from the planet, from the moon, and you're just floating off into the vast of outer space. At that point, when it was kind of fun to jump up in the air and have no gravity with a little bit of a sense of control, at that point, it's no longer fun. You're just spinning and spinning and spinning. And there's no ends to, the destination you're going, and you're losing sight of direction. You're also becoming nauseous or sick, and you're just like on an endless roller coaster in cycles. Okay, so that analogy is to explain our spirit as eternal beings. Should we leave our bodies and become spirits, just pure spirits? That's the basically the reality that you would go through if you do not enter into God's rest. All right. Heaven is outer space. Heaven is unlimited. Okay. Heaven is unlimited just as outer space is unlimited. Heaven is living inside of the imagination of a person and is continuing to expand just as outer space is continuing to expand. Both have no limits to their depths. So heaven is compared to outer space in a lot of ways. It's similar to outer space. Heaven has no limits. Also, outer space has no limits. God made creation in a way that would speak to who he is and speak to a lot of things. There's so many messages in the creation itself. And if you get off into, space exploration, you get to understanding, what's out there outside of this planet, then a lot about eternity is explained. So heaven has no limits. And also what has no limits is the imagination of a man, the mind of a man. And the two are boundless. Okay. Now, both have no limits to their depths. When we become spirits, we walk into the knowledge of all things. Jesus said that ye shall know the truth. We realize the full capability of our imagination, rather for better or for worse, for eternity. In this realm of spirit, we basically come to a point where we are creating for forever. We're creating our own realities for eternity. When you come into a place like that, where you are creating your own reality for eternity, then it can either be heaven or hell based on the reality you create. Either it is in sync with what is real and what is true, or it's a complete, it's basically false. And it's everything that you create is a lie. And that is the spinning of an astronaut, just going in outer space without any gravity, without any sense of up and down, without any sense of direction, without anything to stand on. The whole idea of entering into God's rest is that you would enter into a place in your spirit, in your imagination, in the invisible. You would enter into a place where you are in knowledge of what is real. What is real becomes becomes paramount whenever you can create your own reality as a spirit. Okay. When we become spirits, we walk into the knowledge of all things. Ye shall know the truth, Jesus said. We realize the full capability of our imagination, rather for better or worse, for eternity. When you are living in a world forever where you can create your own reality forever, the only thing that truly matters then is what is real, or what is true, or what is fair, or what is right. Excuse me. Or what is right, or what is God, or what is good. Okay. In that moment, whenever you are in charge of your own reality forever, the only thing that matters then is the Creator's true and initial intent and purpose for your life. Because imagine existing forever with no idea as to why. Well, you were made to be loved by God. And that right there is the foundation. That is the gravity. That is what keeps you from floating forever in cycles and in circles, is the purpose of your existence. When you, so discernment becomes a high commodity when you are floating forever in the vast of your imagination. Discernment, having the knowledge between good and evil, having the knowledge between right and wrong, knowing God, not necessarily knowing evil, but knowing God, knowing what is fair, knowing what is right, knowing what is true, knowing what is real. Whenever you are in a world where you can create your own reality, it becomes very, very valuable. Knowledge of God and the Creator's initial intent for the purpose of your life becomes paramount in a place of lawlessness. Jesus came so that we might be able to, Jesus came to teach us how to live in a world without laws or limits, okay? Proverbs 1 says, you shall eat the fruit of your own ways and be filled to the full with your own fancies. For the turning away of the simple will slay them, and the complacency of fools will obliterate them. But whoever listens to me shall dwell safely and be free from fear of evil. So Jesus coming, he came and he expressed a great amount of love and compassion, even for his enemies, all the way to the death of himself. So he combats lawlessness in the world and basically sin in the world with lawlessness and righteousness, lawless love, unconditional love. He combats unconditional hate with unconditional love. And that was a way to put into us, into our hearts, into our minds, into our imagination, the way that you will exist in a world where you can create your own reality forever. And there's no limit to what you can create. This all coincides together. And he's showing us how to live in a lawless world, in an invisible world, in a world where there are no boundaries, okay? He's literally the way into eternal life. There's a right way to go into eternal life, and there's a wrong way to go into eternal life. There's a way that leads to life, and there's a way that leads to eternal death, based on you, on your identity, on your soul, on your soul's condition, on your spirit's condition. But it shouldn't be based on that. It should be only based on the definition that God has of who you are. And if you know God, if you know the definition of who you are in God's eyes, then you'll never be lost. So what does it mean to enter into God's rest? Entering into God's rest means to enter into God's truth as an eternal being able to create its own reality. Throughout the Bible, God has been preparing man to enter into his truth, his reality, his existence, because it is the only thing that actually is real, okay? In the physical world, God's existence seems almost completely fake or unreal, but in the spiritual world, it is the only thing that matters. It is the only thing that is real, okay? The truth matters. I heard that in the movie one time. This guy was in court, and all these people were lying on him, and he just blurted out in anger. He said, the truth matters. I'm an innocent man. The truth matters. On this side of life, I'm not going to say what we do, but I'm just going to say that the truth, it doesn't necessarily matter as much to often it's easy to get away with a lie here. You know, lies are sold left and right. But the truth on the other side of this life, it is actually the component that holds us together. It is the only thing that keeps us from losing our mind in a world where we can create our own reality. It's the only gravity of an astronaut floating in outer space. It's the only thing that can bring him back to home and keep him from getting sick from spinning. Okay. It is the only thing. Okay. The truth is the only thing that keeps us from spinning in circles until we get sick as astronauts, as explorers, as space explorers, as people on an endless journey discovering the unlimited vastness of outer space, as unlimited eternal beings searching the ends of our creative ability forever. Okay. The stories of the Bible are all stories about faith. Okay. Check this out. They're all stories about faith, about people in their journey to discovering the things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. Okay. You look at the Bible and you see all these stories, and all of them have a central core purpose or meaning. All of them have a central idea. The idea is that God is trying to cultivate a relationship with man. He's trying to form something between man and him, and there's a good reason. Okay. All the stories are stories of faith, and faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. A good example can be found in Abraham. Abraham was told to walk some very, very far. Okay. Very, very far. It was like halfway through a country, the way that he had to journey on behalf of this voice that he was hearing, that he believed is God. And that was the beginning of God beginning to lay the foundation of this world that he was bringing man into. Okay. Whenever he said to Abraham, I'm going to make you a father of many nations. I'm going to take your people to the promised land. I'm going to take you to a place. I'm taking you to a place. Okay. Man was in such an adolescent stage. It didn't even have the grid to understand what it was or where it was that God was taking it. Today we have science. We have a lot of further understanding of creation, but that doesn't take away from the understanding of creation that they had back then. It just is a different way, another way to explain what it is God is doing. And so I'm going to explain to you the science behind what God was showing Abraham and what he was trying to get Abraham to lay the foundation for this world to come, that God's rest. Okay. What he was trying to do. So he has Abraham walk so many hundreds and hundreds of miles in this direction. And every step of the way, he's going based on a voice in his head. Okay. This is something that he cannot see. This is something that it takes faith. Okay. So he's building upon a place in his heart. Okay. He's building upon a place in his heart with every step. This place is becoming realer. This God is becoming realer. This reality is becoming realer with every single step. He doesn't just do that, but he also obeys God's command to give up his only son and sacrifice him for God. This is huge. This is like a cornerstone in the world that God has invited him into. This is a place in his heart that he is literally going. And now he's doing something, establishing something in this place in his heart. Okay. All of this is in his heart. There's no physical, God didn't show up himself. There was no physical manifestation of all this, stuff that is, oh, that's God. It's a great big miracle. None of that. All this stuff is in his heart. Okay. Keep in mind where this is going. Now, he says he's going to be the father of many nations, and he tells them that his people will be in bondage, his offspring will be in bondage for so many years, and that does happen. Moses, the children of Israel, he has a son. His son's Isaac. Isaac gives birth to Jacob and has two sons, Jacob and Esau, and Jacob has all these sons. The 7 sons become the 7 or 12 sons become the 12 tribes of Israel. And then he has the children of Israel, and he has Moses, and he tells Moses, hey, I want you to deliver my people from Egypt. You know, I'm getting ready to take them to a promised land. I'm going to take them to the promised land. Okay. Now, it's a land flowing with milk and honey. And in our minds, mind you, mankind didn't have the grid to understand what it is that God is trying to cultivate inside of the heart of man and what he's really trying to say. Man didn't have the grid to understand the science, and I'm going to explain the science later, but he didn't have the grid to even understand the science. Back then, what they perceived as, you know, the soul, all they knew was there was a soul. But now we know things on a molecular level. We know that there's energy. We know all these things that they just will call it. It's just the soul. Okay. There's just the heart, right? And so he promises them to take them to the promised land, and things don't go according to plan exactly. Moses delivers the people from Egypt. They go into the wilderness. They rebel against God, and they fight off a lot of nations on the way to the promised land. They take a whole extra 40 years. People die, and then they finally get to the promised land. Now, you think that all that was just to bring God's people to a chunk of dirt. It was not to bring God's people to just a chunk of dirt. That wasn't the whole point. It wasn't for them to acquire land on earth. That wasn't the point. What God's envisioning is bigger, okay? And there's lots of territorial wars going on to this day because of that land, because of a physical chunk of dirt. It's deeper than that. What God was trying to show his people and take them to was spiritual. It was eternal. And so all of this is explaining how God is inviting mankind into this trust, building this trust with mankind. And the trust is so important, okay? Abraham displayed that trust, this faith, okay? This faith is so important that they are not just getting to a physical place, not just getting to a destination, not just achieving a thing or becoming this thing. It's about the trust that they are building along this path with God. God started the trust relationship with Abraham. He founded it with Abraham getting ready to sacrifice his son. And then he starts to build it even further with the children of Israel going to the promised land and walking all that way and overcoming these armies and splitting the Red Sea. He's taking them into another dimension, into another place in their heart, making them act out on the invisible, okay? On things that are in a spiritual realm, in a spiritual dimension. All right, so the stories of the Bible are all stories about faith, about people in their journey to discovering the things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The promised land was God's rest, okay? It was a physical, the promised land was God's rest. It wasn't as much a physical place as much as it was a place inside of the human mind. It was the only place inside of the unlimited human imagination where things were real, okay? Because I'm going back to that astronaut example. If you are a spirit and you have the ability to create your own reality forever, well, at that point, as an eternal being, the only thing that actually matters is what is real. And the only thing that is real would be according to the Creator, okay? I hope this is all linking together. The only way to enter into God's rest is by way of our trust in God. Building trust in God is paramount above riches, above cars, above money, above clothes, even above the entire world. That goes back to my second point. Prosperity preaching is harmful to God's mission of building our trust in God. Building trust in God is paramount. Everyone who is preaching that if you follow God, then he will provide this material good or this physical prosperity is being hurtful and very harmful to God's mission of building trust with his people. Trust is the key, and there's a reason for that. God may give you a few things. God may give you a few things here and there in the beginning, and like signs and wonders. This stuff is to initiate the relationship between you and him. But ultimately, he takes away everything to refine your trust in him, because in reality, entering into his rest for eternity is the only thing that matters. You see in the beginning of the Bible, you can look at the beginning of the Bible and the beginning of history, you see all these miraculous things God does. He does really powerful and like things beyond our wildest imagination. He does. And as a believer, you start off with God, and God is going to show you things in the beginning of your walk with him. It's like he's inviting you in to this relationship, giving you a reason to pursue him. But once you've began that journey, he's going to take away stuff. He's going to take away more and more and more and more, because he's after your trust. It's about refining your trust in him. The trust is the key. And so that's why God is so silent in these last days. He still does stuff, don't get me wrong, but the stuff like in the times of Moses with parting the Red Sea and people just doing these crazy things, these wild things, that stuff you don't see as much. And it's because God is in the process of refining our trust in him. The only way you can grow in trust in someone is to like give them the benefit of the doubt. Okay. And it doesn't come through signs and wonders. Jesus said a wicked and adulterous generation asks for signs and wonders. It actually, it defeats the purpose of God. So when we talk about prosperity preaching and how, oh, if you do this, then God's going to give you this and he'll show you this and this miracle, this and miracle, that, it's defeating of the purpose of God. Okay. And down to a science, it's defeating of the purpose of God, because God knows who we are and what we are, what we become. And it eliminates our ability to trust him, to grow in that trust. So why would God give you the world and then take it away? The answer is in order to build trust. Examples can be found in Jesus. Look at Jesus on this cross, like he's dying for the sins of mankind. And he believed heavily in God. And God continued to test his trust, continued to test it and to refine it and to grow it all the way into the point where he's on that cross. And this is where Jesus has his only moment of doubt in the whole story. He's on the cross and he's bleeding out and he says, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? This is like the climax of this building of trust between him and God. But sure enough, God raises him from the dead and he rose with all power. But he had to refine the trust. That was the key. You can see examples in Mary. Mary was told, you know, your son's special. I'm going to give you a son, and he's going to be the salvation of mankind. And she has this baby. And she's talked about by her community. She's ostracized. She goes through so much until he's 33. No one believes that she had a baby as a virgin. All this is to refine the trust between her and God. All this, even to the point where she has to give her son over to do God's will. And he's brutally murdered. That also is a refining of God, of her trust in God. Then you go to Abraham, and we already been over that example. Knowing God's ways is learning God's trust, learning to trust in him, okay? We're going into the invisible realm, okay? You're going into the invisible realm. Once you leave this physical body, you go into the invisible realm. How do you navigate the invisible realm? How do you keep from floating forever? How do you not get lost in a false reality? The only way is to know who God is and to trust in him, to have this faith that is substantial enough to hold you up even when there's nothing, okay? It's all done so that you can navigate the invisible realm, aka the spiritual realm, aka the place that only exists in the imagination. What does it mean to enter into God's rest? Entering into God's rest means to enter into God's truth as an eternal being able to create its own reality. Okay? Let's see where we start up here. All right. Next one's here. That's why Jesus said, that whoever doesn't give up his life and all that he has is not worthy to follow him. Where he is going, it's because where he is going is a place where he is going. Where he is going is invisible. Okay? It exists inside of the unlimited imagination of a man, and it requires trust to navigate your way into God's rest. That's why he said that. Okay? Trust is the only way to enter into God's rest. There are levels to trust. Now, this is the part 2. There are levels to trust. Here's an example. If someone promises to give you money, cars, clothes, food, land, or even the entire world, and they actually give it to you, how much would you trust them then? Some might say, oh, I would trust them with my life. You know, I would trust them, you know. But a smarter person will be like, well, just because they gave me a house, a car, and all this stuff doesn't mean that I can trust them with my child. You know what I'm saying? Or trust them with my life. You know what I'm saying? They could do anything. You know, they're still human. So there's levels to trust. Okay. And the truth is that if you give somebody even the entire world, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can fully trust them with your kid or with your soul, okay, or with your life. It's something, there's deeper levels of trust that transcend all physical matter, okay, because that trust is kind of conditional. The trust that God is trying to cultivate with us is unconditional. So it actually involves a level of trust that is beyond this world. That's why he asks us, what does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? It goes beyond all physical things, even our bodies, even everything that we have, family, friends, everything. Okay, it goes beyond all things that we can see and touch. It's a deeper trust. So how much would you trust this person? Would you trust them? Would you then trust them with your money, cars and clothes, house, etc., just because they trusted you with theirs? Would you trust them with your life? Would you trust them with your soul? Questions, rhetorical questions. The fact is that even if someone gives you the entire world, that can only guarantee so much trust is given in return. Jesus was taken to a high mountain even. This is example. Jesus was taken to a high mountain by the devil and shown all the kingdoms of the world. And Satan was like, hey, I'll give you all this if you bow down and worship me right now. He was after Jesus's trust. Trust is so crucial. And the level of trust that God is trying to cultivate in your relationship with him transcends all the possessions in the world and universe that he could ever. It transcends all the possessions in the world and the universe that he could ever give in order for you to trust him to the degree that he wants you to trust in him. That is exactly why he gave his son Jesus. Okay? That's why he gave his son Jesus. Because he wanted us to trust him even more than that. He wanted us to trust him to a higher degree than material things. It had to be deeper. He wanted us to trust him with our soul. Love the Lord thy God with all thy mind, body, heart, and soul. Love God with everything that you are. It's a deeper level of trust. And there's a reason for that. But that's why he gave us his son specifically as a sacrifice. That's why he gave us him, because of the meaning and significance of that on a deep spiritual level. Okay. God did that because God knows that if you do not enter into his rest, if you don't have knowledge of who God is, of what is real in the mind of the creator as an eternal being that will create their reality forever, then you will be lost forever in the power of your imagination, like an untethered astronaut without gravity, spinning in circles in the vast of outer space. Okay? Proverbs 30, verse 7. These are supporting scriptures. Proverbs 30, verse 7 says, 2 things have I required of thee, deny me them not before I die. Remove far from me vanity and lies. Give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with food convenient for me, lest I be full and deny thee and say, who is the Lord? Or lest I be poor and steal and take thy name, the name of my God, in vain. He says, don't give me riches, don't give me poverty, because both of them are extremes that can take me away from my trust in you. Give me what is going to build trust in you, God. That is the key. Proverbs also says, there is that maketh rich, yet hath nothing. There is that maketh poor, yet hath great riches. Okay. He's showing, like, King Solomon, one of the wise men that ever lived, is saying these things because he understands that trust in God is the key to true prosperity. There's no prosperity outside of God anyway, but he's illustrating, like, hey, there's some people that make themselves rich that don't have anything. There's some people that make themselves poor yet have great riches because they have trust in God, which in the spiritual dimension is very valuable. Philippians 4 verse 12. I know both how to be abased and I know how to abound. Everywhere and in all things I am instructed both to be full and to be hungry, both to abound and to suffer need. I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me. 1 Timothy chapter 6, 6 through 8. Now there is great gain in godliness with contentment, for we brought nothing into this world, and we cannot take anything out of the world. More supporting scriptures. Hebrews 13:5. Keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have, for he said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Matthew 6:19 through 21. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. When he says heart, just put in that place imagination, reality, okay? You're going to exist where your heart is. And that's why he's like, put it all in heaven. Put it in your heart. Lay up treasures in your heart and treasure what is meaningful to the heart, because whenever you're a spirit, that's all that matters is your heart, is who you are. Okay. Proverbs 16 and verse 8 says, better is a little with righteousness than great revenues with injustice. It's better to have a little with righteousness than great revenues with injustice. Just meaning fair, okay? Without what is fair, good, real, or true, okay? This is all linking back to the science of what I'm telling you about this whole thing, is that we are all going to become astronauts. We're all going to become astronauts, and we're going to explore the vastness of outer space for eternity. This is all figuratively speaking. And the only real gravity that we will have as astronauts is the knowledge of God. And either you have the knowledge of God tethered to you to keep you from floating off into oblivion, or you are lost spinning forever. This is all to illustrate whenever we become spirits, we are unlimited and eternal beings that will be able to create their own reality forever. And so hell is whenever you are being tormented by the devil with the pleasures that are not real. But to have knowledge of what is actually real is to experience and feel something. Imagine just being void of feeling and just empty, a deep black hole. That's what it's like to be able to create a reality that's not real and to be like tormented by it. So, yeah, that's the word for today. I said all that because there are a lot of people in this world who preach the prosperity gospel, and they make it seem as though if you don't have riches, if you don't have money, then you're not blessed, or that blessings indicate a person's relationship with God. And they do that in a way to promote the love of money. It's so ingrained in the westernized Christianity that a lot of us are like, I feel like I shouldn't be content. I need to have more things, and I'm going after my blessing. And it's the opposite of what God is trying to do in building trust with you, because he understands this science that I'm talking about. It has nothing to do with the physical things of this world and you attaining possessions or attaining stature or attaining this, attaining that. It has to do with your identity at the end of the day. If you have identity in God, then you're rich. And you know who you are to God, then you're rich. And Psalms 14, he says, you shame the counsel of the poor, but his safety is the Lord. There's so much poor shaming. You know, you shame people who are poor because they must be cursed. God must not like them. They must have did something bad. That's why they don't have money. And all of that is that psychology is promoting the devil's agenda of us trying to make this world our home. But the reality is that God is taking away from us everything to form in us a level of trust in him that will allow us to go into eternity peacefully. To enter into God's rest is simply to have knowledge of what is real. That's the reality, okay? Whenever you become a spirit and you can create your own reality, knowing what is real, knowing what is true, knowing what is fair, knowing what is good, knowing what is God is all that matters. It's the only thing that holds any real value.